Sometimes there is such a thing as too many tomatoes. So we're going to fix that. Hi everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres. And as you can see, my counter is like under. I have already frozen as many tomatoes as I can in the small deep freeze to wait for turning into sauce, but I have no more room in the deep freeze and I have no room on the counter. I'm going to save a couple of these big beautiful ones like this for a tomato sandwich or two, but everybody else from itty bittiest to the biggest is going in to the sauce. First thing I'm going to do is rinse these guys off. Now, why do you say would I rinse them off? Well, to be honest, they get dusty. They get dusty sometimes in the kitchen, they get dusty outside, and would the world end if I didn't wash them off? Oh, heck no. But I like to start with everything pretty spit spot clean. So I'm going to choose a couple of these babies to keep. Some of these are going to require some heavy pruning because they've got some rotten spots on them, and I'm going to be talking about how I decide if it's okay to have a rotten spot or not. This is one of those moments when I have to say, if you have no sense of smell, you're going to have to come up with a different solution. Because I rely very heavily on my sense of smell with things like that. I can sniff a tomato and say, perfect, or I'm going to rinse these guys, and then I'm going to bring them back over here, I'm going to clean them up, and I'm going to put them through my tomato processing machine. Now, not everybody has a tomato processing machine, and for the first, I don't know, 20 years of my marriage life or something, I didn't either. But I'll tell you what, I watch some of these homesteaders and they're sitting there and they're scalding their tomatoes and they're peeling them and this and that and the other thing. That makes total sense if you are canning chopped tomatoes or semi-whole tomatoes or something like that because you like to put it into soups or stews and have, you like stewed tomatoes. If you're just making sauce or paste, you do not need to spend that time. And that's where a little technology comes in hand. Now, this is not one of those newfangled technology things. The only thing newfangled about mine is that a few years back, we actually got a motor for it. So I no longer have to crank it by hand. But for the first 10 years or so that I had it, I cranked it by hand and it was fine. It still beat the heck out of scalding tomatoes. If you have never done this before, let me explain. You do not want to make tomato sauce with the skins on. The skins tend to get tough. Now, when I first started as a young newlywed, my mother did not make tomato sauce. I had no idea how people made tomato sauce from scratch. I don't even know, there certainly was no YouTube to go look. Did I have a recipe? Probably not. I probably just said, tomatoes, we should be able to make these into sauce. So I would sometimes peel them, sometimes not peel them, but I always fished out the additional skins that I felt were too big or too tough, and I always fished out the additional seeds because some tomatoes are really seedy. Now, if I were to pick something like this guy is a paste tomato. He's not going to have a huge amount of gooey stuff in there. He's going to be fairly dry so that you don't have to boil him down. But a lot of these other guys are big beef and Wisconsin 55 and all that other kind of stuff, and they are actually eating tomatoes, but they make sauce just fine. If I want to make sauce with those, I can use my machine. If I don't have a machine, the way they recommend you do it is you boil some water, and most people will score, they'll take off the stem, and then they'll score the bottom and the top. You don't have to do that, but it makes it easier. And you'll dump these in there for like a minute, and then you'll fish them out real quick and dunk them in cold water. And what that does is that cooks just the very outside of the tomato skin, so it makes it super easy to peel peel it off, it practically slips right off. And then you're not dealing with that skin in your sauce. Now, you still have to deal with whether you need to trim up the cores and whether there's any rotten spots or anything else like that, but that takes care of your skin problem. Now, I'm going to show you what I do, because I wouldn't consider myself lazy, but I don't see a reason to work harder than I need to. We are rinsed. First thing I'm going to do is, if they have a stem, I'm going to pop them off. Second thing I'm going to do is, if there's anything in the least bit rotten about it, I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to sniff it. Oh, that smells good. So there's nothing wrong with this tomato. There was just a little bit of a rotten spot on the top. In this case, because it's a decent big one, and you'll notice how meaty this is. This is probably Wisconsin 55. It's got tomato seeds in it, but it's mostly pretty meaty. I'm going to toss those into a bowl. And when I get enough done into that bowl, then I'm going to run through my processor, but not before then. And I have a feeling this is no good. Yeah, it's no good. It smells fermented. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to toss these things in the compost. I'm going to rinse off my knife. Now, if I have something like this section here that's kind of brown, I'll just take that off. There's nothing wrong with it. Especially since I'm removing the skin anyway, I probably could leave that. I don't normally worry about cores unless they're big and yucky and green. Oh, that smells good. But just gonna, yeah, wonderful. And I'm going to continue this until I get through all of these. I don't always cut them into lots and lots of pieces. I do it partially based on how big the tomato is. Now, see, this tomato here has got quite a bit of a section here that's kind of not ripened. I'm going to take that out. Do I have to? No. My goal, however, is to make the most wonderful tomato sauce I possibly can. So I'm going to remove anything that I would be concerned might affect the flavor. Now, why, you ask, would I bother to cut these up? Well, it's less stress on the machine, to be honest. I don't want to break the thing. I can get replacement parts through Lehman's in Ohio, but do I want to have to? Not really. My original parts lasted probably 15 years, and now I have replaced a few pieces, but I see no reason to wear things out sooner than I need to, and if simply making an extra cut with a knife will make them last longer, I'm good with that. I'm probably overcautious about some things, but wonderful tomato sauce is a very cool thing. We are currently still using last year's tomato sauce for our weekly pizza adventure. I love having my own tomato sauce. I love knowing what's in it. I love the fact that I was able to control how it tastes. I love the fact that there's no recalls. See, this is another good reason to cut these open. It looked like a tiny blemish on the outside, but it's less than tiny on the inside. I don't want to throw that into my sauce. Now, do they throw that into the sauce when they're making stuff at a commercial processing plant? Yes, they do. And obviously, we don't die from tomato processing plants that have little bits of gunk in them like that. It's a personal preference. So I'm going to check the smell of that. It smells perfectly fine. It's just that one little section that looks icky. And because this is our tomato sauce, we get to decide if something that looks icky gets put in it or not. Now, that gives you the idea of step one. Step two is the machine. I'm not even 100% sure where I bought it, but if I had to guess where I bought it, I probably got it through like Burpee. Probably Burpee, because that was one of my main seed providers when we lived in New England. The seeds seemed to work perfectly for our environment there. For years, I had looked at that catalog when it came every year, and it would have these food strainer sauce makers, what it's called. Roma Sauce Maker Food Strainer, okay? And it's basically a variation on a meat grinder. Except instead of grinding your meat, what you're doing is squishing your tomatoes or other veggies or fruits. So say I want to make raspberry or blackberry jam, and I don't want to have seeds. Okay, this guy will fix that for you because he'll take the seeds out. The juice is going to come out there. And as soon as the juice comes out and I get enough, I'm going to put it into this pot. And then I'm going to start boiling it down. While I'm doing that, I'm going to continue finishing the rest of these tomatoes out. And then I'm going to rinse everything off quickly, because if you leave this kind of stuff unwashed in your sink, oh, what a mess. You don't want to do that. The skin and seeds is coming out there. Right there. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in here. And I'm going to smush it a little bit so that it gets down in there. And then I'm going to turn this on, and it's noisier than heck. That's my big complaint about this, is I don't like the noise. We do not like adding citric acid or bottled lemon juice or any of that other stuff to our tomato sauce, so we pressure can it to make it safe. Because we're not really set up to do the kind of testing that they would do in a commercial establishment, where you could make sure that the level of acid was where it needed to be in order to be safe. We just pressure can it, and that makes it safe. That happens next. And then I put it probably on the back burner so it's not in the way. And I start to cook it on low. And I'll be right here doing the rest of my processing, so I will know to stir this periodically. You just don't want it to burn. It's very easy when you have high sugar fruit like a tomato, because tomatoes are actually fruits, even though we think of them as veggies. But the fruits from the tomato is a high sugar content item, so it can burn. You don't want burn. Burn tomato, bad. Back to work. Now this goes in here. And that's all we do. And I will decide how thick I want this, and I will continue to boil it down until it's as thick as I want it to be. Now, I may not actually can it today. It depends on my schedule. I actually have a newsletter that I have to write tonight, and I have other things that I have to do. So Henry has gone to Flagstaff because the electric in my studio died the other day, and he was able to figure out what went wrong. The two of us replaced the main inverter. I was just strong back. Strong back, weak mind. He tested things and he decided that there were a couple of parts that needed to be replaced. We had one of the parts, we did not have the other part, and he found it in Flagstaff, so he is going to Flagstaff to pick up that part and also to buy a few groceries on the way home. Just a couple of things that are on sale.